that people can't be declared uninsurable.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Keith Caldwell, and he's giving us some information in reference to faith and community. And of course, Mr. Caldwell, I think before we had our first commercial break, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to talk about health care in the state of Tennessee. Not necessarily to talk about any specific program, but what are some of the needs that you've seen in terms of the travel that you've done in the state and et cetera, of people who need health, and not only health, or any other kind of social kind of situation that you've had to deal with as a community organizer?
Yeah, so in traveling across the state, we know Tennessee is one of the economically poorest states in the Union. And going up in Appalachia and all the way to Memphis, we see people need health care. And actually, Tennessee, we need to sign off on the Affordable Health Care Act. It's also called Obamacare, which we know that that's part of the resistance to signing off on it. And we really need to get the political will so that Governor Haslam will sign off on this. We know that nationally, this bill actually allows 30 to 40 million people who previously were considered, who didn't have insurance. It doesn't allow for insurance companies to cherry pick people and to say you're uninsurable, and those kind of safeguards so that we can have, and that the net gain of that financially would be increased. But there's also a moral obligation that we have as a state to look after our residents, and we just need to create the political will to bring the pressure to bear on Governor Haslam to sign off on this.
And so not only do we have some issues dealing with health in the state of Tennessee, there are other issues, issues of incarceration. I would imagine that you've been involved with those, and at least you are aware as a community organizer the impact that it has on families and etc. Let's talk about from some of the things from that perspective as a community organizer.
I would recommend folks to read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's a phenomenal book that breaks apart this prison industrial complex and this sentencing, even around nonviolent offenses. We're talking about a lot of folks who have marijuana convictions, and we know in some states marijuana is legal, and so we see the disparity, and we see the numbers that roughly 13% of all the population uses drugs, black, white, Latino, and then we see how that increases when it comes to sentencing, and then how it increases when it goes to time served exponentially with black and brown people receiving harsher sentences, more time, and disproportionate contact. So we want to work on that as another issue. I think about Nashville, and we say that this civil rights movement, that this was a seat of power, of resistance. And I was trained by the Reverend Jim Lawson, and there's still folks like Brother Matthew Walker Jr., who just passed away, Brother Kwame Lillard, Diane Nash, just phenomenal people who, when we look at the civil rights movement, that Dr. King actually came to Fisk and said, I didn't come to Nashville to bring inspiration, rather to gain inspiration, because this was one of the most organized cities. And we look at the factors that made Nashville this way. We think about Tennessee being touched by 8 other states, Nashville being the buckle of the Bible Belt, and also called the Protestant Vatican, because we have the headquarters for Baptists and Methodists, and all these mainline denominations are located here in Nashville. But more than that, Dr. Haney, their publishing comes out of here. And so religious publishing and the impact, you can't hardly go to a hotel room in the world and open up a Gideon Bible and see Nashville, formerly Thomas Nelson, Methodist Publishing House, Baptist Publishing House, and the images that they put in the Sunday school material. And so they decide what Moses looks like, what Miriam looks like, and we see that was an entire movement around icons and iconoclasm to pull these images down because of theologically what they reproduce, particularly around images that support white supremacy. And when I say white supremacy, people cringe, and we want to talk about white supremacy not as a deconstructing white people, but deconstructing the brutal 500-year legacy of slavery that continues to show up in unjust systems and structures and institutions like the prison industrial complex that criminalizes black and brown embodied people and poor white people at disproportionate levels.
Very good. And so in a real sense, as a community organizer, it means that you're working in various communities around the city. Why don't you?
Around the state.
Around the state.
Yeah, and so to continue with about this interpreting community. So there's several interpreting communities, right? So we saw in 1960 when Vanderbilt kicked Jim Lawson out for organizing the sit-ins, right? Then there was an interpretive community with American Baptist College, Fisk, Meharry, and Tennessee State University that interpreted scripture very differently, right? And so these are two interpretive communities in the same city, right? And it depends where we are seated, determines where we stand in a lot of issues. So we see these interpretive communities even today, and how do we create a narrative if we are in faith that reclaims, particularly the Christian faith, the life and ministry of Jesus. And we think about that. A lot of theologians call the birth of Jesus the scandal of particularity, to have been conceived by a teenage, unwed, colonized Jew for a mother. We see that in Luke too. So, and to say, how could this person come, and we expect from power, from the empire, and come from the underside and invert every power structure that there is, even 2,000 years later. So we want to reclaim that narrative, because people who are oppressed can identify with the Jesus that comes from Nazareth. Can any good thing come from Nazareth? Because it was such a ghetto. And to say it's no matter where one is born or where they started out in life, that we want to create the opportunities that they can rise to the heights of their abilities. And if that means addressing, we call it social sin, unjust systems, because we want to limit this idea of sin to personal piety, right? But I'm Methodist, so we believe in the outworking of that through this understanding, this social holiness, right? And this holiness shows up in how we live in community together and who is my neighbor. So my work is deeply inspired by my faith.
And so what we'll do, Mr. Caldwell, is to take this final commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll have about 10 minutes, and that will give you an opportunity to bring in additional information that you'd like to deal with, as well as to appeal to whatever people you would like to appeal to this morning in reference to what you're doing. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. About individuals,
and former felons. Talk about gentrification, man. Homeless housing, affordable housing.
You can see that all around, and you can see that all around, especially over in East Nashville and wherever you go. It's killing a lot of folks.
I wouldn't mind talking about Black Lives Matter.
Hey, that's you can talk about it. That's 10 minutes, you know. Because we've done a show. Black Lives with Dr. Lewis Baldwin. Black Lives Matter. So that's or anything else you want to talk about. You know, that's the purpose of this show and all these shows like this.
That's
you don't have anything to talk about, so you let somebody else.
Just let them flow.
I want to talk about it. Well, this is the last 10 minutes, and this is your 10 minutes, and so I can appreciate we've had individuals on this in that seat to talk about all of these. These issues, ban the box. As a matter of fact, this is where I became familiar with the idea of ban the box. We did an incarceration show. And the lady was talking about the difficult problems that folks had after they were released from prison to get a job, and primarily because of the box that they had to indicate their situation in the box, and if your name was in the box, you didn't get any job.
It'll be 30 years later, and you still.
Yeah, so you got a good agenda there. So we want to talk about all those as a community organizer. You might be another Mr. Obama. You know, that's
I tell you what,
and I know that's what I was thinking about. That's what you got to be thinking about. That this is how Obama started.
I went to the White House during the first administration.
Oh yeah. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Keith Caldwell, and he's giving us some information in reference to religion and faith and religion. And so, Mr. Caldwell, let's pick up where we left off before we had our second commercial break, dealing with religion and faith, or faith and religion, however you wish to pursue it as a community organizer, and some of the issues that you have found to be of importance that our audience ought to know about today.
Yeah, I'd like to direct folks to some of the work done around affordable housing. You know, we're experiencing enormous gentrification here in the city, and it's displacing a lot of folks. There's a group called Open Table, and Open Table works with people who are homeless and people who are threatened to be homeless. We think about there are 200 people a day moving into Nashville, right at 60,000 people a year, one of the 5 top cities in America. But it's really a tale of 2 cities. So we see maybe Charlotte Avenue as the line of demarcation, and this affluence on the West End side, and then North Nashville, particularly with the 28th corridor being open, being just so rapidly gentrified that people are being displaced. And there was a rally this past week that folks are doing. Fort Negley, people were camping out because the mission is so filthy they don't want to go to military.
Is that why they are not there? Is the mission situation that bad?
A lot of the folks who are living at Fort Negley said because of the and the restrictive manner that it's run. So I mean, we appreciate the work that the mission is doing, but we want to make sure that folks have affordable housing. You know, and Nashville's Table. Open Table is doing some great work around that. I want to encourage folks to connect with them and to just participate in any way that they can to help support the work, the incredible work. So they're pushing for public policy. There's the Bill Barnes Fund that the mayor, Megan Barry, who I think she's a wonderful person, and she's also a politician. So we have to make sure that we're creating the political will for her to move, and creating the opening so she can move through, and because I think that she really would like to do the right things, but politically that there's no backlash that comes on her for doing the right thing. So we want to make sure we support that. I was thinking about Ban the Box that Democracy Nashville has been working on. It's brought Kenneth Kane and some others that, so Ban the Box is this on the application asking about a felony conviction, and with any governmental job, we want to delay that question to maybe the last interview. We're not saying to not disclose at some point, but if you check that I have a criminal record on most applications,
you know, interview after this,
thrown out the door.
I understand.
And some of these things are 20, 30 years old. People maybe did smoking marijuana or anything, and it continues to haunt them. So we want to say, okay, you've paid your debt to society, and we want to restore that. The restoration of voter rights to former felons. People like Representative Brenda Gilmore helped to get that passed about 6 years ago, and NAACP, other folks, to say if you have this one conviction and it doesn't fall within, there are 4 exclusions that can't be expunged, and then people can get opportunity to get another start. So I've also been working some with Black Lives Matter. And we think about Black Lives Matter, and so this idea, well, don't all lives matter? And of course they do. The best way I heard talked about Black Lives Matter, it says, if you live in a cul-de-sac and your house is on fire, and the fire truck comes, It's going to pass every house on that cul-de-sac and go to the one that's burning to the ground, to the one that is in most need of attention. So the person next door could say, well, why didn't you spray my house? Well, it would hurt your house to spray it if you don't have the fire.
No fire.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so it's not to the exclusion of other lives mattering, but it's addressing the 500-year brutal legacy of the dehumanization of people. And so on this continuum, it places all human beings back on what it means to be human, so that no one is dehumanized and economically exploited. It is also an echo of Jesus when he says that every human being is created in the image of God, in the imago Dei. As you're talking about being made in the image of God and after the likeness of God, then we need to respect everyone's humanity, and we all benefit when all human life is respected.
Well, now, Ms. Caldwell, what kind of support do you feel that your organization is receiving in terms of the kind of social program, the kind of religious program and topics that you're dealing with? I mean, is there a real concern that people have in Nashville in reference to some of these things?
Yes. In fact, we noticed back last November of 2014, we were going to have a candlelight vigil. It was a Black Lives Matter. And that same day, the verdict came in on I Can't Breathe, Eric Garner. So we were expecting, on Facebook, we had about 70 people who signed up. And that was at 6:00 p.m. We were going to hold candlelight vigil in front of the downtown police precinct. Well, at 5:30, we had 300 people. At 6:00, we had 700 people. And 30 or 40% of those people were well-intentioned white people who brought their children, their 10-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter, and said, you know, I've benefited from white supremacy, but I know what it's done to me, like that it contorts my soul, and I want to undo that, and I don't want my children to experience that. And so we're here. And so that's a reclaiming of one's humanity, you know, despite this system that does that. We knew that the folks were a little restless, and so the vigil turned into a march. It was a nonviolent march downtown. So we went down Broadway and we were coming up through the honky-tonks. And so here we are, coming up the honky-tonks, and people stumbling out and hearing Black Lives Matter from a 95-pound white woman with her 2 children. And so, but we see this as a human problem, and that when we do better, we all can do better. And so the interrelatedness of our humanity, and not to just, you know, we look at the current election and the vitriol that's going on, and who can be the most angry and the most fearful, and that's no way to be in community. So we want to have a love ethic that recaptures our humanity. And
Nashville would seem to be an excellent place for that to start. In view of all of the religious, I think you've mentioned earlier, all the religious institutions, whether publishing institutions, churches, and et cetera, and et cetera. So this would, in a real sense, be the Rome, in a real sense, of the Black Lives Matter movement.
And there's a group called Surge, and they are white anti-racists, doing fantastic work. And the same factors that were here in 1960 are the same factors that continue to make Nashville a beloved community, or a potential site for beloved community.
And so in a real sense, Mr. Caldwell, as we end this show for today, we've got about a minute and a half. In a real sense, you think that some of the work that you and others are doing really has an impact in terms of making people more aware of what is going on, affordable housing, health, incarceration, and et cetera. These are all some of the issues that you're dealing with in order to try to improve society, and in a real sense bring religion and faith together.
That's right, and particularly in the face of this prosperity gospel that is being preached around, if you believe God, then you can have a Mercedes-Benz in your driveway, and it has no critique of unjust systems. It has none. And it's a failure, and it's about this individualistic, capitalistic Christianity, about, you know, it's really like I make a deal with God. For me, versus that God is saying, I'm coming back for a people, that we are saved In the collective, we are saved in the aggregate. And so our salvation is tied up one to another, and that our salvation isn't entirely otherworldly, not by and by yonder ways, but on this side of the grave. And to imagine that I would have to die to experience any liberation. Oh, how convenient is that for the powers that be, that I would have to die in order to be liberated. And so I serve a God who is concerned about me holistically.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Caldwell, let me thank you for coming by and giving us excellent information, because I think that there are so many opportunities that people miss when they don't understand what you're talking about now. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and